Did you know that a lot of the common things you're saying in difficult conversations actually make the situation worse? Welcome to the art and science of difficult conversations. I'm Chris.
And I'm Lucy, and we love having difficult conversations.
That's right. And each week we'll either share a tip, hear how others have gotten better at difficult conversations, or demonstrate common difficult conversations and what to do and what not to do.
Let's get into it.
In this episode today, I want to chat through 12 roadblocks that really get in the way of having a good, productive conversation when things are difficult. Now, if you were listening to previous episodes, you heard me talk through some things not to say, like but or talking instead of letting silence fill the air. What I want to go through today are 12 actually additional roadblocks by Thomas Gordon. So this is a psychologist that came up with these 12 roadblocks to good active listening, to good listening and communication skills. I learned this a long time ago when I was becoming a therapist, and it's actually helped me a lot in just framing what should I be doing when I'm listening, when somebody's sharing something difficult, and or we're trying to have a productive conflict conversation and they're just emotionally heated and things I'm saying or not saying are actually making things worse. So I'm going to go through these 12. I'm not going to go through all of them in detail because some of them are pretty straightforward. You shouldn't do things like yell at the other person. But some of them actually are going to be surprising. So I'm going to go into detail on those ones. So, number one, the first roadblock that comes up is ordering, directing, or commanding in a hard conversation. So, you have to do it this way. You must figure this out, or you will do it my way. Very straightforward. Obviously, that's going to get in the way of any hard conversation. So, that's why you shouldn't be saying those things. Second one is also a very straightforward, very common thing: warning or threatening or admonishing. Basically chastising or talking down to someone. If you don't do this, then I'll do this. Or if you don't do this, then this other consequence will happen. Or you'd better do it my way or else. Or stop that or I'll, whatever. Now, I'm a parent. I do that all the time with my kids. Whether it's good or not, it remains to be seen. It's hard. I try to break myself out of the habit. Sometimes it just happens. So it's about how do we break out of that habit because it's just so commonplace, especially if you were raised in a culture like mine where everything's a little more withholding. The third one is moralizing, preaching, or saying what they should do or ought to do, or basically prescribing what somebody should be doing from your own set of standards. So what you should really do is this. You ought to do it this way. Or it's your responsibility to figure this out. That's not a good way, as you can hear it, it's not a good way to have a conversation where the other person has a dialogue with you. That's why it becomes a roadblock to communication. The fourth one is one that surprises people because it sounds positive, and I'm going to talk to you why it actually gets in the way of good communication. So this fourth one is advising, giving solutions, or suggesting. So what I would do is this, or why don't you try it this way, or let me suggest something for you. Now, it doesn't seem like it's going to be a roadblock, but essentially, if you're talking to somebody and you're trying to solve a problem with them and you start talking, you start giving your solution, you're communicating a lack of confidence in them. It's a very subtle thing that's happening, but you're essentially showing them that you don't trust them to solve this problem. Here's what I think. And you're also not engaging them in the process. You're just telling them what to do. Again, you're not making a dialogue, you're just making it a monologue instead. So offering suggestions, offering advice is actually a roadblock to actual communication both ways. Number five is using logic or arguing. Now I've talked about that before. If you've ever listened to my podcast or in my course or anywhere I ever talk about this, in difficult conversations, logic won't work as well as you think it will. Because when we're in that state, when we're in that fight, flight, or freeze response state, we are really emotional. And so logic is not going to make sense. It's not going to sit well with somebody. And they're just going to feel and they're going to keep pushing back no matter how much you have logic or data on your side. You need to get them down emotionally first before you can bring in logic. If they're not ready to hear this logic or data, it's going to make them defensive or resentful because nobody likes to feel like they're wrong about something. So if you start bringing up data before they're ready to hear it, they're just going to dig into their position even more and be more aggressive about their position and their idea and their side. Number 6 is criticizing, judging, blaming. So you're not thinking clearly. You have nobody to blame but yourself. I couldn't disagree with you more. Very straightforward. It doesn't take a whole lot to realize that's not a good thing to do in hard conversations, especially if you're trying to build trust. Number 7 is one that surprised me when I first saw this, and I still have a lot of hard time getting over. It's praising, agreeing, or even supporting the other person's ideas. So I think you did exactly the right thing, or I couldn't agree more. The same thing happened to me. The problem with this is we often think that by praising them, by agreeing with them, and by supporting them, we are doing a good thing and we're showing that we're on their side. In fact, I even suggest that, right? A lot of times a way to disarm somebody from their emotional high is to just say you're right or say that makes sense. And yes, that can reduce that. If you just focus on agreeing and don't have a good follow up, it can be seen as empty. When you agree, even if you praise, it needs to be at a reasonable time. It needs to make sense in the conversation, but also it depends on your follow up. So you need to ask questions to get more curious and have them explain their position once they get off their emotional high. Don't use it as a way to just agree and end the conversation. It needs to be a opportunity to springboard into understanding their world even more. So praise is one that confused me a lot when I first heard of it, and it still takes getting used to, but it makes a lot of sense if we're trying to create a dialogue where the other person talks more. Number 8 is very straightforward. It's labeling, name calling, ridiculing. You're being a worrywart, or you always think this way, or you men always think this way, you women always think this way. Whatever labeling you want to do, it's obviously not great. Labeling, name calling. As you could tell, it's not great in hard conversations because it's just making other people feel defensive. Number 9 is analyzing, interpreting, or diagnosing. So it's trying to figure out assume what the other person's intent is. So you're just trying to get under my skin, or you're just trying to do this or that, or what your problem is you don't prioritize the right things, or you probably feel that way because of this and that. The problem is that even if you're accurate, even if you're right, they may feel exposed, they may feel embarrassed, and that may cause them to close up and not be willing to talk. It's interesting because when I suggest this, I don't suggest it in the sense that you haven't figured it out. It's not about trying to figure out intent. When I suggest doing this, it's in a way that you're essentially asking a question, is this accurate, without asking the question. And you're not doing it a lot, you're just doing it every now and then. So you're using it as a springboard to other things. But if you just use it because you're trying to dig at them, or if you're trying to say that you've labeled them and figured them out, it's not going to work out for you. Number 10 is another one that seems really odd at first. So reassuring, sympathizing, consoling. Don't worry about this. It's going to work out. Or look on the bright side. Or everyone goes through this. Or my thoughts and prayers are with you. All that kind of stuff is really just trying to minimize our own discomfort with it. It's trying to minimize our own discomfort with these difficult feelings. It's not helpful in the moment. When I was in grad school, one of the things I learned about was if somebody's crying and we give them tissues, it sends a message subtly that we want them to stop crying. And so we're basically sending a message that we don't want this heavy emotion. Part of hard conversations means being comfortable with hard emotions and difficult emotions. And so we need to be comfortable with hearing negative feelings, no matter how hard they are, no matter how big they are, because they're part of the other person's story. And they're part of our stories too. We have these feelings too, and it's okay. And so we need to create a space where both of it is okay. Number 11 is questioning, probing, interrogating. Now, this is different than when I suggest using questions to learn more information, because the way I suggest asking questions is they're very simple, they're very broad, and they're just learning more information, helping you understand about what the other person's doing. What's going on for you? What do you think about that? In this type of questioning, probing, this is the things I tell you not to do, which is, why did you do it this way? And then what did you say after that? Did you let your supervisor know if you're talking to an employee? Did you talk to your manager? Why didn't you do this, or why didn't you do that? Those are interrogations, right? That's sending a strong message that you don't trust them. And honestly, sometimes we will focus on that if we don't want to deal with the feelings. We'll focus on the facts or the logic again to really make sure we don't talk about emotions. And the 12th one is avoiding, diverting, or ignoring. And that's really straightforward. It's really just trying to change the subject altogether. I'd rather not talk about it. That's your problem. You think you've got problems. Wait till you hear about my day or my week or my family. That's essentially shutting down the conversation. So those are the 12 big roadblocks that actually stop communication. It's ordering people, it's directing or commanding them, it's warning them or threatening them. It's moralizing or giving your values or shoulds or oughts. It's advising them or giving advice or suggesting things. It's using logic. It's criticizing. It's praising, or it's labeling, or it's analyzing or interpreting, or it's reassuring or using sympathy, or it's questioning, treating it like an interrogation, or just avoiding the topic altogether. Start thinking about how many times when somebody's coming to you with a problem do you start doing that, or how many times when people start arguing with you or debating with you about this or that. How often do you start using any of these instead of asking more questions to build dialogue and have more conversation? My guess is you're going to realize you do these a lot, just like the other things I told you not to say. Don't beat yourself up if you do this. We all do this. It's natural. Just think about when you're intentionally not trying to do these so that you can create more dialogue. Hopefully, this is helpful. Let me know if anything stands out to you, if anything resonated with you, or if you disagree. You're like, forget this, Chris. I want to be able to do this. Here's my reasons why we should be doing this. But let me know. You can find me on LinkedIn. You can find Lucy on LinkedIn. And we'll see you next week on this podcast.